that was like one big realization for me was I was taking on all the weight, taking on all the load myself. I felt like every problem I have to solve, every issue I have to fix. And, part of that was that I wasn't releasing control to God. Part of it was that I have to do this, and this so I can reach all these goals, or I have to do, and God's like, hey, who told you you had to do that, by the way? Did I tell you to do that? And I realized I was just like going 100 miles per hour. I wasn't stopping to listen to his instruction. I wasn't stopping to take note of the direction that he really wanted me to go in. And it didn't serve me well. Ultimately, I tapped myself out. Not free, got that beat.
What's going on, family? It's your brother Lawrence here with another episode of Watch God Work. And today I have our sister, Natalie Jenkins. What's going on, sis?
Hello. I'm so excited to chat with you, to be part of this platform. So, hey, everyone.
There's so much that you do, but I cannot do it justice. And so who is Natalie Jenkins?
I do own a strategic communications firm. It's called StrateJenk, which I actually started last January, right before COVID hit. I started business and then hello pandemic, which has been a really amazing journey, and God has graced me in ways that I could have never imagined in this season. So such an honor and pleasure to be able to serve that organization. I'm also very passionate about writing. I love to read. I love to travel and explore. But at the root of everything is that I just really love people. I really have a heart for connecting with others and understanding others. So I think that is probably the common thread through my work and my writing and how I interact with everyone around me. And I guess the most important thing is I am a believer, completely sold out to Christ in everything that I do.
Talk to me about just the environment coming up, the dynamic in your home, and how that cultivated your gifts, but also your faith.
Absolutely. So in terms of the way that my faith was cultivated, my father is a pastor here in the DMV area, Pastor Jenkins of First Baptist Church of Glenarden. Very proud and honored to be part of that church. But my faith has always been a huge, huge part of my life. As you can imagine, having parents in ministry, church is like the center of their world, and then sort of automatically by default becomes the center of your world. But, growing up, my parents did a really amazing job of intertwining our faith into our daily lives. So, I made a decision myself to commit to Christ, but even before, at a very young age, I made that choice. But even before then, my parents really did an incredible job of modeling what that looked like in home and outside of home. And, it was, if we're going to school in the morning, we're praying in the car. Like, you have to pray, whether you want to pray or not. We're taking turns and we're praying in the car every single morning, or we're praying before bed. So really, I think prayer was a huge center of my life growing up and has built my faith to where it is today.
Particularly brothers and sisters who grew up, in the church, right, where you had, parents, mother, father in ministry, serving in ministry. I always talk about the two phases, quote unquote, if that's the case, right? Meaning there is I don't really have a choice, but I like it and I enjoy it. And our parents are being obedient and they're raising me up with the knowledge and the fear of the Lord. But then there's also this other phase that we go through, I think, beyond that, where it's just like, okay, it became like another level of real. The news became really real for me at this point, beyond what I had. Was that your journey? And if so, what were those different moments when you were like, okay, God, whew, this is good news for me because this, like, what was that for you?
Yeah, absolutely. That is a really great question. I think some of those moments for me that I think of, I mentioned already that from a very young age, I accepted Christ and made that decision on my own. And my dad always jokes that even when I was little growing up, like I really just had conviction. One time we were going to an amusement park in Florida, and I noticed like my parents were kind of like trying to finagle like a discount or like get in without paying, like trying to talk to someone on the side. And we got inside. I felt horrible about that. I'm like, these other people paid full price and you guys, and then my dad felt so bad. He's like, you're right, Natalie, I'm going to go back up to the window and pay. So I think even from when I was really young, I had like a really tender heart towards God and like wanting to do what he declares right, or leaning into the convictions that he's placed on my heart. And I think that's something that has sort of followed me. But, you know, as many kids who start at a young age surrendering their life to Christ, you kind of stray. And even when I was in college, I was still, you know, attending these little small groups and things like that, but I found myself getting sort of far away from who I knew that God wanted me to be and like where he called me to be. And this is like one moment for me that just really like rocked me, shook me. To be very transparent, while I was in college, at a certain point, I started like smoking heavily, like almost every day. I was like smoking. And I started feeling that like my body was just not wanting me to smoke anymore. It was like, don't do this. Like, you're not supposed to be doing this. So I remember one day I was with my friends in their apartment. Everyone was smoking. I just started feeling so sick, and I just got up. I'm like, I have to go. So I lived in the same building as her, like a few floors up. So I leave out of her apartment, and like my vision is going black. I'm like, gosh, what is going on? So I just prayed. I said, Lord, if you get me safely back to my apartment, I will never smoke again. I'm done with it. I hear you. I know you've been telling me to stop. I'm listening. Like, I surrender. I give it up. I know you're trying to get my attention. I'm heading up to my room. In the elevator, I like collapsed. I didn't know this, that I had collapsed, but I passed out, and two people got on. And they woke me up. They're like, are you okay? I'm like, oh my goodness, what happened? They were so sweet. They're like, you just took a little tumble. So they asked me if, you know, I needed help getting back to my room. What? I said, yes, if you could please just help me back to my room. So they just with me, you know, got me inside, made sure I was okay. I was like, I am so embarrassed. Thank you guys so much. And as soon as they left, I just start sobbing, falling in worship. I'm like, Lord, I know that you were protecting me. Anyone could have found me on that elevator. It could have been someone who have taken advantage of me. It could have been, anything could have happened. And he honored my request to get me back to my room safely. So I honored my promise to him and completely sort of like shifted after that point. And then, you know, being in Philly, I started going to a church there called the Block Church. Really the most amazing people I have ever met in my life. And seeing, you know, I've been around people my whole life who fully have surrendered to Christ, but sometimes you got to see other people. Like, if it's just
you got to get another vantage point.
Yeah, like when it's just your parents, you're like, oh yeah, I know my parents love God. But being in this community and really rooted around people who were so sold out to Christ made me realize I had some work to do.
How does just your faith inform how you wanted to approach this career and how you wanted to do it and who you wanted to work with? Just walk us through kind of what that looked like.
One part is that it's allowed me to be really intentional about the types of organizations that I decide to work with, the clients that I take on. I am really drawn to purpose-filled work and work that I makes an impact. And I do believe that a big part of that is because of my faith. After at like the last semester while I was in school, I said, I really want to figure out a way that I can support people who are incarcerated. So I just researching organizations. I found a small org in Philly called the Pennsylvania Prison Society. I reached out to them literally just to just to volunteer to see if they like needed help with anything, but they actually were hiring interns. So I said, oh, wow. Okay, sure. I'll try to be an intern. So I go in for the interview. Who ended up being my boss, she's like, oh my gosh. She looks at my resume. She's like, this is everything we need. Like, can you help us? I'm like, absolutely, of course. So I interned with them for a semester. It's a super small org, so I didn't really anticipate that anything would happen after that. But at the end, right after I'm graduating, they reach out to me with a job offer. And my boss was like, I can't afford you full time, but there's a consulting firm that needs a communications associate who consults us. And they're willing to hire you part-time, and we're going to hire you part-time. So split my week between a communications agency, consulting firm, and working with the Pennsylvania Prison Society as a communications associate. So it was just the perfect marriage of the type of work I love to do, my natural gifts, and being able to work on projects that truly make impact and are truly like transforming people's lives.
In this time, I think entrepreneurship, I think people have had to, in many ways, their eyes have been opened to say, yo, I need to have multiple lines, but also there's some opportunities to serve. There's some pain points that I need to resolve, which I believe is the essence of business, solving problems, creating value for people. But there's sometimes in braiding businesses, sometimes the problem it creates is the problem in our own lives, which is our pace, our ability to stop, stress, and so because I'm seeing so many brothers and sisters, young brothers and sisters get sick, not just because of the pandemic, I'm talking about sick sisters, fibroids, things, stress, right? Taking on business, doing stuff and taking on things that maybe aren't sustainable. How do you guard? How have you built StrateJenk and the work that you've done? How have you always kept the rhythm that is God honoring around your limits? And then where God wants you to stop and where God has to fill in the gap and you're not trying to overwork. Just tell me, just walk me through that kind of, that dialogue and that journey you've had.
Wow, that is an amazing question. And even, in my first year, I found myself getting burnt out so early on, just feeling like, I was working for 14 hours or, up all night long, couldn't sleep at night because I'm just like always thinking about work, like not even exaggerating. I would lay down, get ready for bed, but my brain is still going like 100 miles per hour. So even my sleep was not restful. And then as soon as I would dream about work, I would wake up, open my emails. As soon as I get up, I roll over, check my emails. And I realized I was in this pattern. I was doing that so much. At one point, it just kind of like broke me. And I felt like I couldn't do anything. And I was like overwhelmed with fatigue and like feeling so drained that I couldn't show up as my best self with the way that I was doing things. So that was like one big realization for me was I was taking on all the weight, taking on all the load myself. I felt like every problem I have to solve, every issue I have to fix. And, part of that was that I wasn't releasing control to God. Part of it was that I have to do this, this, and this so I can reach all these goals, or I have to do, and God's like, hey, who told you had to do that, by the way? Did I tell you to do that? And I realized I was just like going 100 miles per hour. I wasn't stopping to listen to his instruction. I wasn't stopping to take note of the direction that he really wanted me to go in. And it didn't serve me well. Ultimately, I tapped myself out. And going back into it, kind of like after recuperating from that season, I realized, one, I had to offload some of my responsibilities. As many things as I could, I had to let go of the reins a bit and like bring on people to help me and accepting their help. But also what is really helpful is being intentional about having quiet time with God, even if just sitting, listening, stilling your mind. My mom is really good at doing this, at taking time to just be still before God. I'm really horrible at doing that. But you know, when I realized that was happening, that's something that I had to start prioritizing was slow down, like relax a little bit. You might even notice I talk really fast, and I think it's my brain is always like, you know, going, but reminding myself to like take deep breaths, slow down, listen to God. We're always strengthened and renewed by his word. And I forget it. And I'm like, God, this is so hard. Like, how am I going to do all this? And he's like, you haven't even like opened up the source I've given you to replenish yourself in how many days. And you're asking me like, oh, it's so hard. I had literally this encounter yesterday. I'm like, God, how am I going to keep doing this? He's like, spend time with me. That's it. Hang out with me. That's all you have to do. So I was just journaling for like an hour, like letting it all out. And I felt such a release, like could feel it physically. So I think that is something that's so important, to spend those times hanging out with God, releasing things to him, listening to know where he wants you to go, and accepting help and putting in measures so that you don't have to do everything on your own. There's a girl that I know, and she is like so in tune with the voice of God. She'll wake up, God's like, hey, go to the corner of, I don't know, a specific street. And she'll just show up there and be like, okay, God, I'm just going to go for a walk here. She'll get there. It'll be a person there, and God will tell her something about that person. And they just have like this beautiful interaction. So I just love getting to connect with people like that who are really eager to hear from God, you know, meaningful connections that are really centered around God.
Communication is life. Words spoken, the world was spoken into existence by the word. The word became flesh and saved us. The word gives us life. The word gives us reprieve and peace. Our words, power is in them, life, death. I think that people recognize the power of words, especially when they don't hear them in times of loneliness, in times like this where phone calls from people. Communication is timely, as I say that to say, and I thank you for stepping into the lane that God has called you to, for doing your part in the body that needs every single part, in every single nook and cranny of the world, in industry, in friendship groups, in neighborhoods, in cities, to do their job. And you're doing it. And so for that and much more, I thank you. I thank you. I thank you, Natalie. You're one of one, and I appreciate you being faithful to the work.
I want to thank you too, and I honor you as well for the platform that you're building, and for shining light, because I think, you know, conversations like these really make so much of a difference. Have you ever just watched something online and you're like, oh my gosh, that's what I needed to hear? So you're part of facilitating those moments, and I really honor you for listening to God and putting this platform together. It's really amazing. I'm honored to have been part of it for today.